I think anytime I hear somebody like, I'm a storyteller, I'm like, are you just like a branding agent or something? So I'll explain what I mean by that. So there is in Austin a storytelling community. This is a group of people that gather in bars and backyards, and they all get together and they just tell true stories about their lives. Now the wonderful thing is that when this community started, maybe about like 4 or 5 years ago, there was basically one storytelling night, one main storytelling night, and that is Backyard Story Night. It is still alive and well. You can go downtown every month or so. They have it at Chirp Charlie's now. And so there was one, and they were inspired largely by storytelling nights like The Moth. How many of you guys are familiar with The Moth? Raise your hands. I thought this would be more NPR crowd. So The Moth is it's a podcast and it is a radio show on your national public radio station. And people go up and they tell true stories about their lives. With The Moth, they can be anywhere from like 10 to 15 minutes long, and there's a podcast I swear it will make you cry on your way to work if you listen to it, and I recommend it. And
what is it?
I'm sorry?
What time is it?
Oh, so there's the Moth Radio Hour, and I don't know exactly what time it goes on because I'm like rarely in cars anymore, work from home. But there's a podcast and you can get it at any moment. So the Moth started, and I won't go too deep into their history. Started in New York City, I believe, or maybe it was San Francisco. Anyway, everybody would gather in apartments, and it used to be like writers and artists, and they would just share these stories. And you'd have these people who went on to be famous, who were already famous, or like ran magazines, sort of just sharing these crazy, wild stories, and people just dug it. And I think they dug it because there's something about the vulnerability and rawness of something that actually happened, right? Like there are writer circles that share their fiction work, and those are very good, and we get a lot of different things out of those. But when somebody's sharing something that actually happened to them and their real emotions, sometimes you even see them kind of working through something on stage. And that for me is, and I'll talk more about that later, is like the moment for me, when you really see something happening, when you like connect in a very interesting way. So anyway, this happened to like small apartment buildings, and that was kind of like the East Coast way of doing it, the other way of doing it. And so what do we have in Texas? We have backyards. And we can host a lot more people, it's less crowded. And so, the thought was just to take a backyard, invite your friends. Everybody has stories, so let's just start telling them. So that started Backyard Storytelling Night. So other people were inspired, including me. I lived in a house 3 years ago at 50th and Duval Street in Hyde Park. And at the time I was living with two friends, people I met on Craigslist, who became very good friends. And so what happened, we would throw these potluck parties, and that's another story, but we would throw these potluck parties that were themed, they were big. I'm very big on theme, that'll come through in the storytelling nights later. And so we did like a punk rock karaoke pizza night, where everybody brought their own pizza. People made like a tikka masala pizza, it was great. We did a whiskey bacon night kind of thing, and they were these big productions. What would happen, I would always make a cocktail. So I would drink the cocktail, then I would start telling stories. And then other people would start telling stories. And so it kind of organically became a bunch of drunken millennials just like talking about their lives, and you get really cool things coming through. So then we had a new roommate move in who was from the improv scene, named Matt Stoner, still runs Hyde Park Storytelling. He had a bit more formal experience with the art in the community. And so he was like, hey, we could, turn this into like a more formal thing. And so we did. And so Hyde Park Storytelling was born. This is the second or third storytelling night in Austin. It's a beautiful backyard. In fact, they had a folk night last night, but they have another storytelling night coming up. It is just the cutest place. And you get these really, really awesome stories. Over time, it grew to be very big, and now there's basically this kind of waiting list. So okay, the Austin storytelling community starts to burgeon. You get more like greetings from Queer Mountain, which happens to cheer up Charlie's. You have on this stage, you have Mortified people. The greetings from Queer Mountain is LGBTQIA storytelling. On this stage, you get Mortified once every couple of months, and people share stories from their journals from when they were young. They just read straight from it. And so now there are, according to my count, I think about 18 different storytelling nights in Austin. And I won't bore you with going through all of them, but if you go to the Austin Storytelling Facebook page, if you're a Facebook person, we have a catalog of all of them. So you can kind of start to find out which story nights match yours, you match your interests. So anyway, it's grown into this really huge thing, and so I am the producer of the storytelling night, StoryX. StoryX was started last October. Now, I had been at the 50th Duval Hyde Park Storytelling Night for a while, and then I moved out to do my own stuff, and then I said, in this new storytelling night, we're going to do something different. I saw in the storytelling night that we had these fantastic communities of people who, again, were bonding over vulnerability. Somebody would tell a story afterwards, people would go up and say, I felt that same thing. And you'd really get these new connections being made, which is fantastic. But I wanted to see something a little bit different. I have a habit of undermining everything, and so I decided that I wanted to do a storytelling night that sort of questioned a lot of the assumptions we have about storytelling. So StoryX was born, StoryX, Austin Story Experiments. And the idea is that every time we have a story night, we're going to run some kind of experiment, whether that is on the theme itself, on the speaker list that we collect, or on or maybe we're doing one just on the audience, or we're doing we're challenging format. And so I decided, basically, I wanted to do a storytelling night where there was nobody to tell me that what I was doing was a bad idea. And so I was like, how do I want to open this? This was last October. And I had this habit, even with the potluck nights, I was like, well, what's this really about? You know, maybe it's like sometime in the year, and it's like, okay, well, February, Valentine's Day, what's it really about? It's really about heartbreak. And I go into a dark place very quickly. And so for October, I was like, okay, this is like Halloween. What's it like really about? Well, Halloween's about death. So let's make our opening event death. And so it's death, dying, and what comes after. And objectively a bad idea to open any conversation with, hey, we're all gonna die. But I wanted to do it. And so we put the feelers out there, and the thought was, like, every event we do, I get nervous and jittery because I'm just like, people are gonna react poorly to this. And it's not meant to be just incendiary, it's meant to challenge some of our ideas around things. And the idea was, with death, like, we're not gonna try and make it cute. We're not gonna try and, put a bow at the end. We're just going to hear some very real stories of this real deep thing that we don't allow ourselves a lot of space to talk about, and we're going to sit in it. And we're going to sit in that intellectual stew, that emotional stew, and we're going to come out at the end. And whatever happens, happens. We never know what's going to happen. The cool thing about these stories is that, and the same with other storytelling nights, nobody knows what the stories are. So every single time somebody goes up, the speakers are surprised, the audience is surprised, everybody's surprised. And so it does create this very weird dynamic. And with StoryX, the thing we continually strive for is to create these events that again challenge ideas, and maybe you actually see something happen on stage. So the first one we did was death. By the way, real quick, how many of you guys have been to any of the Beckers, the storytelling nights in town? Has anybody? Oh, rad, cool. Well, I hope you're gonna go to a lot more. And so our first one was death. The next one that we did was last January, and we wanted to challenge format. Typically, what happens when somebody tells a story is a lot like this. Somebody's on stage, and Mike, I'm the loud one. You listen to me, and you just listen into it, and you're very nice people, so you're very quiet. But I was like, that's not the way we tell stories in the real world. It's usually a bit more back and forth, we're all in a circle kind of a thing. And so we called it, I forget what we called it, but what we had is we had somebody on stage telling a story. We told them to have loose notes. And the theme was like unresolution, unresolved stories. I liked the idea of that. And we had somebody else on stage with them, an inquisitor, we called them. And that person, as they were telling the story, would interject and try and go like deeper into their thought process. And are any of you familiar with the authentic relating community at all? Oh wow, I have so much to show you.
Another presentation.
So you had another presentation. I'm only sort of peripherally involved with that community, but the idea is making real connections with other human beings by asking, very like in a safe, comfortable environment, exitable environment, very probing questions about your emotions and your thought processes and what you think about things. And I like it for a lot of reasons because I care a lot about emotional vulnerability, and I connect with people who share a little bit about themselves, and I like to earn the trust to get people to share things, and I share back, and you have this wonderful virtuous cycle. Well, so anyway, that's a little bit what they were doing on stage in January. You had one person explaining something about their life, and you had somebody just digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And so you get this all of a sudden. This is the first time we've done this, and we've never been to another story night that did this. All of a sudden, because we have the audience asking questions too. So now people from the audience are sharing things about their life. There was one girl who shared a story about an STD that she had, and it was a hilarious story. And then somebody in the audience stood up and was like, I had that same thing, I went through this, and she makes a joke. And all of a sudden, this thing that could have been a lot more serious is like there's a community around it, and some people are made a little uncomfortable, but that's okay. Because if everybody left our events feeling 100% like stable and good, and like that was easy, we've done something wrong. So it became really inspiring, and we did one in February around non-monogamy. We talked about sort of ideas of free thought. We tend not to have a lot of free thought around the idea of monogamy in the world. To the point to where that was something, we've had, we've been to story nights on, LGBTQIA issues, we've been to story nights on race, and the audience is very sort of like warm and open. You have a bunch of white people who come, and they're, they're open to receiving these ideas. You talk about non-monogamy on a stage, people clam up real quick. And so it's a very interesting line, and that can be another talk too. So we did one on non-monogamy. We had one on, in April we did one called Liar Liar, where people just told stories we didn't know whether they were true, whether they were fake, or were somewhere in between. So nobody knew, right, except for the storytellers themselves, and they gave me a list. So at the end of that story night, we told everybody, like, we're gonna tell you what the answers are, right? You heard all these stories, we're gonna tell you which ones are true and which ones are not. So me and my co-host, Kim Williams, we all the stories came up and went up to the stage. We're like, all right, it's a time where we tell you, and we decided we're not going to tell you. And there was just an audible groan from the audience, and it was like my proudest moment as a producer, because I made 60 to 80 people just like be so angry at me. And the other thing I forgot to mention about these nights that somewhat excuses my mild assholery is that every single one we raised money for a nonprofit. So we raised around $300 for the Kind Clinic. This last time we raised money for the Lilith Fund. So we expose every single time we expose people to a new nonprofit. Every single penny for the night goes to that nonprofit. We have beverage sponsors, usually local breweries. Again, ones that people may not know about. And we're just trying to create this curious experience, right? And like whenever I talk to breweries, I'm like, give me your weirdest stuff, because this is a weird crowd. They're ready to be challenged. So yeah, we did the Liar Liar one, and then recently, probably the best one we've done, we did one on masculinity. So again, one of the reasons that we're talking to is because my particular story night challenges a lot of assumptions we have about the world. And in ways that often even people in the secular community don't do. I've met a ton of secularists or non-theists or anything like that they will challenge everything about the world, but it's like, oh, but when you fall in love, you just know, and it's wild to me. So we want to challenge the people who think that they're already challenging themselves. Like this is that's very much an aim of it. So anyway, give you a little bit of a sort of timeline there. We've been doing that for almost a year now. We want to continue doing it and may kind of change locations. But the thing that I've always enjoyed about it, again, is that we want to make people productively uncomfortable. And we think that that is important in the community. There are other spaces to feel warm and fuzzy, and you should, right? Go there if you need it. But we wanted a space for people who could challenge themselves, who wanted that. And I think that's an interesting group of people to bring together. And I feel in some ways this is the kind of thing that you guys do, right? This is, around free thought. And so that's why I kind of came here to talk about that. I do want to sort of like, I don't know, I really like Q&A like I mentioned. So I'll just kind of pause for a moment. Does anybody have sort of like any questions about the story names or any of the concepts? Or what about you, Mike? Oh, Becca.
Just kind of like the format, like how long are the stories, how many people do you have?
Yeah. So one of the lovely things about the storytelling scene is that there's something for everybody. And you have the listening room up north at Genuine Joe's, which is like, there's like 10 people in like a small room, and the format is very loose, and it's typically a bunch of comics. There's a big overlap with comics and improvisers in the storytelling scene. Then you have Backyard Storytelling Night, which can be hundreds of people at Sheriff Charlie's, and those stories are like 5 to 7 minutes. My stories are 5 to 8 minutes. You have other ones that are 10 to 15. If you go, another very good one at the North Door is Bedpost Confessions. That's all about sex and relationships and sexuality and gender, and it is an amazing storytelling night. Those stories can be up to 20 minutes long, and those are more read from. They're pre-written, and so it's just, there's all these sorts of flavors, and you get to decide what it is that you like. And if you don't see what you like, then it's so easy to create them. And there's a community of people who are ready and willing to say like, hey, yeah, we'll help you start that storytelling night. We'll share all our secrets.
So, are there more traditional, so Texas has a long history of sort of the cowboy tall tales and that kind of thing, and of course, go back to Homer, and do people do like fictional stories as well, where they've got a repertoire of things that they can talk about as well, or is it all just like biographical?
Yeah, so for a lot of the Backyard Storytelling scene particularly, it's biographical. But there are storytelling scenes that, and I think we have some of those logged on our spreadsheet, that are people telling these fictional stories, or they're writing circles or something like that. There's one particular storyteller, I wish I knew his name. He's this large white bearded man, and he tells stories every time in all these accents. And he'll tell these old classic tales, and it's always a treat, because it's typically, you hear biographical stuff, but he'll tell these like big grand tales. So a lot of the movement has been around sort of like #vulnerability, biographical stories, but there are circles out there for people who are interested. Oh, yeah, new one.
Yeah, people that attend these meetings and so forth, what are the demographics as far as age, obviously?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, so one of the things that I'm really excited about is that one, there are a range depending on the storytelling night. There's one that happens at the church downtown. What's the name of the church downtown? Are there? It's like one big one. They like do event. No, it's Scottish Rite. That's what I'm thinking. There's an event that happens there with a woman who I believe is in her 50s. I hope she doesn't hear this and be like, I'm 32. And a Hispanic woman, and so she does 2 story nights there, I believe, and older demographics. Some of the backyard ones can be a little like, oh, welcome to our hip East Austin house. But even then, like the storytellers, different story nights place different emphases on how diverse they're trying to be actively. I know whenever we recruit, we're always looking for people of color, for people across the gender spectrum, for people older and younger as well. So Backyard Storytelling Night is very good for very broad demographics. StoryX has attracted now a broad demographic of people. So the Storytelling Night is working to be more inclusive. And I would say that right now you're going to see a lot of young people there too. But I think that a bunch of people, as old as whatever, come and find something to relate to. So yeah.
What books have helped you polish these skills of storytelling or the psychology of talking to people and being more vulnerable?
Yeah, totally. So as far as books, the Book of Life, man. I actually come from a screenwriting background. So I've been, I did creative writing in high school, and when I was in college I studied philosophy, and I did a bunch of film. And so when I did screenwriting, you look at like Sid Field's, I think the book is just called like Screenplay or something like that. And so he talks about sort of this narrative arc that you have to have, which by the way, I'm fully aware I do not have today. And then there's Robert McKee's story. And then it's mostly a pile of trash if you want to write screenplays that way. But he does have some interesting ideas about, taking people very high in order to take them very low and stuff like that. And he's got like archetypical stories. So that's another good book. But honestly, like just going out there and seeing what you like and seeing what you can emulate. It's the same way you try and learn anything. There are some texts around it. You're probably going to pay $500 to go to some storytelling workshop for a guy to tell you like to have a beginning, middle, and an end. But that's fine. I mean, the classic storytelling is Aristotelian. It's three-act structure. So I've always thought about that. Like the key to a story is there's a conflict, and somebody tries to address the conflict. And so anytime, so I've told a story before about how I was on a party boat. I don't want to tell the whole story now, but I was on a party boat, and it was like all these people, and a bunch of people my age having a lot of fun. And if you can tell by some of my personality, it's not always easy for me to have fun. And so I was on the second story of this party boat, and everybody was like, people started like getting naked and like jumping off the boat, and I was like, oh man, that seems cool. But I was just like, I'm really nervous about it, and but like I want to believe I'm the kind of person who would do it, right? And so I'm on the second story of the boat, and I'm just like standing next to it, and it's like dark now. Everybody's about to go, and they're going to close up the gate. And so I'm on the edge, and there's also this like girl that I think is kind of cute, who I talked to earlier, and she just like took off her clothes and like jumped, and she's like, ah, come on, and I'm like, now I'm gonna look like a foolish guy, and so I'm on the edge, and I'm there for like legit 10 minutes. Like I'm there for 10 minutes, and people are sort of like, just do it, and so they're sort of, and I'm yelling back at them, and I'm just like, well, I don't know that I want to, and don't pressure me, and like I'm trying to coach them to coach me, and so then the guy's like, we're gonna close it, man. Like, are you gonna go? And I say like, I don't know, I'm just gonna be like a couple more minutes. And he's like, oh, you got like 2 minutes. Say 2 minutes, and again, I'm just like looking out into like the blackness of the night, and I'm just stare into the abyss. And if you stare into the abyss and just fight it, and you just jump. And I'm doing all these things to psychologically, sort of philosophically, just push me off the ledge, but I can't do it. My legs are frozen. I don't want to die. And most things become about mortality for me very quickly. And so then I look back, and there's like all my friends there, and like they're behind me, and they're rooting me on. They are earnestly, honest to God, trying to help. They want me to jump because they think I want to jump, and it'll be a fun thing, and like, you know, what a life thrill. And I had this moment where I realized that, you know, I looked down and I looked behind me, and I had been there by this point for what felt like a day, but it was actually like about 20 minutes. And I'm like, I'm a grown man. I should be able to do this. But I look back and I realized that, what if I didn't jump, right? Like, how would I be received by these people? And it became clear to me that it was more important for me to know that if I didn't jump, these guys would still have my back, than if I did jump and seemed cool. It was this huge moment of clarity, and I didn't jump, and I walked back over like a fool, but everybody still hugged me, and they cheered, and I was like, all right, cool, I have friends. And it was like, it was this really important experience for me. So anyway, that was a story of how I had a conflict, right? The small thing, I can't jump off. Everybody's had that thing where it's like, I'm nervous to jump off the side of a boat. But for me, it was this big thing, and it said something about who I was, and it said something about who I wanted to be, and what I'm capable of. And I mean, I can do the same thing for, like, I don't know, pouring a glass of water. So you just sort of like find your own style, your own ethos, and but yeah, it was always conflict. And typically you learn something, but I like the idea that maybe you don't always.
That's good.
So that's actually a good segue here. So when people kind of join the community and they haven't done this before,
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you've heard many amateur storytellers who are just trying it for the first time, or
Sure.
saying, what are some pitfalls that you might want to avoid if you're going to try it?
Honestly, the biggest one is just going way over time.
Okay.
This is the other thing I'll say. Like, I am not professionally schooled. Like, I have been paid to tell stories before, but like, I am not like from the Acton Academy of storytelling. The most important thing for me, and I think for most storytelling nights, is you go out and you just try and be honest to yourself. And I tend not to like when things are over prepared, but a lot of people need that, especially to start, and even down the line. So I care most about, are you just being honest to yourself? Are you sharing something that was important to you? And that's all I care about. And that you don't, it's not like an 8-minute storytelling thing and you're like at 14 minutes, because that's happened.
Yeah.
But other than that, there really aren't like a ton of demands.
But there have been times where you're like, this one needs to end.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's
it's over time, and what are the other things that make you feel
Yeah.
like this needs to end?
Are you telling me I need to end? Just
No.
kidding. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. It's just conflict. It's like understanding, like, where are we again? Like, why are we talking about your boyfriend's ex's dog? And a lot of the, what I will say is a lot of pitfalls are people include a lot of details that aren't pertinent to the plot of the story.
Right.
And sometimes it can feel a little artificial to sort of say, well, I had this real vulnerable, textured, nuanced experience, and the couch was red, and and the beard was long, but it doesn't contribute toward the conflict of like, oh, how do I get off this boat or something.
Okay.
And that can be hard to do, and
Yeah.
just comes with practice and people telling you, hey. But at the end of the day, again, like the community is so supportive. You can get up there and talk about your socks for like 10 minutes, and people will clap you all the way up. They will clap you all the way down. And that's what I love about it too. That it's no matter what, it's supportive. It's you did a brave thing by getting up there.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
My favorite topic. People's deconversion story.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, you have people that do that.
Oh, yeah.
It's a separate community.
Oh, well, so my community isn't like
Okay.
my community isn't explicitly
Okay,
accepted.
so it's okay.
Yeah. However, there
Do you have people that?
it's Austin young people, plenty of secular things.
Okay, good. Do
Uh,
they give their stories of how they were once released?
Yeah, so I feel like I've heard that particular story like once in my time, not for lack of there being them, just because there tend to be different, if there's a storytelling night about masculinity, maybe that's not like the perfect time to talk about that. There are always different themes, but again, not for lack of trying. There have been stories of people, I remember, what I will say, and I guess I can say this to you guys, that there have been stories where somebody comes up and they start talking about a heavily religious experience, and somebody actually had a trigger warning for a story. They're like, trigger warning, I come from a very religious background and I love Jesus. And I was like, that's so interesting. In Austin, you have to have a trigger warning for being religious. But there's a lot of people who have a harsh history with religions, particularly Catholicism, Christianity, myself included. And so it was appreciated. But no, I mean, we'd love more of those kinds of stories if you want to tell them. So.
So how do you find out about the different storytelling venues and the type that they are?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that. So for a while you couldn't really, it was just sort of whatever you found out about. And there was an Austin Storytelling Facebook group is the best way. There's also austinstorytelling.com, for those of you who are not Facebook users, that was less maintained. So you go there and it's a pinned post at the very top. I've created a spreadsheet of all the storytelling nights, of the cost, of the locations, of the producers, and kind of a one-line synopsis of what they're sort of about. And that's the best way, that's the most sort of collected way to get in touch with all these different kinds of story nights. One thing that I wanted to, by the way, how am I on time? Am I 20 over?
No, you're not over, but we're going to wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so one thing that I wanted to touch on before I stopped was that, so it's a cool community, people share things about themselves, and people challenge themselves, right? So, okay, cool, got it. But there's also the degree to which I've started to see story as like significantly more important than just its communal ability. I think in a very real, sort of like data-backed way, the stories that we have for ourselves and about the world are incredibly important. This is one of the reasons why I try and undermine storytelling sometimes, particularly when we did the Liar Liar event, that shade in between. And it is a crippling anxiety, at least for me, in an age where we are fed a lot of bullshit. And so how do you manage that? How do you cope with that? There's a Two Guys on Your Head, also NPR, Two Guys on Your Head episode where they talk about how we weren't engineered for that kind of thing, right? We didn't evolve to be able to handle that much information and sort it. And so there's the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, which are very important. Like, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, or that I'm way too pretty for everybody in this room, right? Like these, not weird. And those stories, literally, they are a loosely constructed story that shape our experience of the world and with other people. It is not some metaphor, it is a literal statement. And there's also the stories that we tell us about the world. Muslims are bad, or Muslims are good, or even, Christianity can only be a destructive force, or Christianity can sometimes be a good force, or Christianity is the best thing in the world, like these variations of stories. But we all have these mental models. When I go outside, it will be sunny because it was sunny before I came in. It's the story on story on story on story. We have this idea of biology. We evolved to be a certain way. There's some pop Evo bio account. And so I think it's important whenever we think about stories and our experience of reality and of the truth, we realize to what degree we're resting on stories and sort of thinking about what those are, and occasionally thinking about, do we still agree with those? Or are those data backed? Or are those productive for me? I had a huge life change when I started retelling the story about myself to myself. So I think that's one small takeaway. If you weren't already doing it, I'm sure you all were. But yeah, I want to thank you guys for giving me the space to ramble a bit about what I do, and hope to talk to you afterward about it as well. Cool.